Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. This afternoon, I'm going to be reacting to a video requested by Helsing507. It's called Apocalypse Now Review, Practical Military Necessity, made on the TheAlmightyLoli YouTube channel. If you guys want to check out the original video as well as TheAlmightyLoli's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you want to check out my previous reaction to another review made by TheAlmightyLoli on Disco Elysium, yes, Disco Elysium, remember that the card is going to be at the top right here. Just click on it and be able to access it. Pertaining to Apocalypse Now, I have watched the movie. If you guys want to check that out, remember that the playlist card for my movie reactions is also going to be at the top right here. I'll also put the link for the movie in the description below if you don't find the card. And for those who are not able to see the movie because of YouTube's restrictions, I will put the movie in my Patreon. You'll be able to access it there. I'll also put the link for the Patreon link in the description below. And yeah, so if you can't watch it on YouTube, you can watch it on Patreon. It's free of charge, don't worry. Just like on YouTube, you'll be able to watch it free of charge. Yes. Yeah, let us start with Apocalypse Now review made by TheAlmightyLoli. 3, 2, 1, go.
Before we get started, this is a video that's been long awaited. Ever since the Spec Ops The Line one, I've had countless requests to cover this, and it's finally time to sit down and talk about one of the greatest films of all time. This is the end.
Well, you see, Willard, in this war, things get confused out there. Power.
Yeah, confused and just a drawn-out affair, you know? To the point where you don't really know what is it that we are fighting for. What are we fighting against? Is there victory at the end of all of this? Or is it just a quagmire of incomplete missions? Yeah.
Ideals, the old morality, and practical military necessity. Because there's a conflict in every human heart between the rational and the irrational, between good and evil. And good does not always triumph. Sometimes the dark side overcomes what Lincoln called the better angels of our nature.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. The end of everything that stands. The end, no safety or surprise. The end.
I told you not to stop. Now let's go.
Oh my gosh, that point of the movie. If you guys haven't watched Apocalypse Now, I highly suggest that you watch it before watching my reaction to TheAlmightyLoli's review to it. Or watch the movie, then watch TheAlmightyLoli's review, and then come to my reaction. Yeah, this movie. There's no finality to it. Let me say that. There is no finality to the end of this movie. Yeah.
Apocalypse Now. Yeah, this movie needs no introduction. This is a film so famous it's become a cultural landmark, quite literally, referenced countless times and going on to inspire contemporaries that still go on to this very day. It helped shape the modern perception of what a Vietnam movie is. A lot of times if a piece of media wants to reference Vietnam, it will in some way include a nod to Apocalypse Now. Some are more subtle than others, but they are there. Now, for those unaware, Apocalypse Now is the 1979 Vietnam War film directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It follows Captain Willard, played by Martin Sheen, a Black Ops soldier assigned to a mission where he must go upriver into Cambodia and assassinate a rogue Special Forces commander named Colonel Walter Kurtz, played by...
And you know, with this Captain Willard, I was a bit surprised that this Special Forces assassin would be sent alone. I thought he would have a team with him to take down Colonel Kurtz. I thought he would have a team, but he was tasked alone to complete this mission. Yes, he had transportation to take him to his destination, but ultimately it was tasked for him and him alone to, kill the target, essentially. I thought maybe assassination missions take a team to accomplish it, but no, not with Captain Willard. He alone is just enough.
By Marlon Brando. What starts off as an already shady mission devolves into a harrowing journey of insanity and obsession, and by the end, Willard realizes that him and Kurtz have far more in common than he first thought. So Apocalypse Now is an extremely famous movie, to the point that it's kind of weird to even try to introduce it, since it's had such a massive impact on films.
Honestly, I have not watched this movie before. I only watched it a day before because TheAlmightyLoli was suggesting that we should watch the movie before we continue on with his review of the movie, and I was inclined to agree with him because I knew nothing about this movie, and I couldn't truly appreciate what TheAlmightyLoli is talking about if I did not understand the background or the movie itself, So that's why I made my reaction on the movie Apocalypse Now. And now that I've watched it and I understand it, maybe like 70% of it, I can finally come here and watch the review from TheAlmightyLoli. It's a good movie. It'll get you frustrated. It got me a bit frustrated and irritated. But yeah, it's an interesting movie, definitely. And the cinematography is exquisite. I love it.
But you'd be amazed how few people actually know about Apocalypse Now, beyond some surface level details, of course. They know Martin Sheen on a boat, they know Marlon Brando being so fat for the role they shot him in darkness, and they know about the general disaster it was to film the damn thing. Being such a clusterfuck, it spawned an entire documentary called Hearts of Darkness, exploring the factors that made filming such a nightmare. From clashing egos to nervous breakdowns, to Martin Sheen having a heart attack in the middle of the jungle. It's a wild story, something that fans of the movie should really sit down to give a watch so they can put things in perspective. Everything about this movie could have easily fallen to pieces if just a single thing went wrong, and they did.
Okay, I might watch Heart of Darkness as well, definitely.
More than once, but the cast worked themselves to the bone to make it work. Hell, the story around Apocalypse Now is so infamous that the production became one of the inspirations for Tropic Thunder, with the setup being a film crew attempting to shoot a Vietnam movie that's plagued by problem after problem. Of course, this is just the production of the film, which, while disastrous, somehow managed to not actually affect the film in a negative manner. It's honestly impressive how, despite the film having so many hurdles it had to jump through, they managed to make something not just beloved by audiences, but considered one of the greatest films ever made. It goes to show that sometimes perseverance is exactly what a movie needs to be good, to be put under pressure in order for a diamond to pop out. Of course, that's not to say every film should be put under the same strain Apocalypse Now went through. For the love of Christ, don't make that the standard. Just that Apocalypse Now was a case where the crew involved managed to rise up to the challenge and make something special. But how did all of this start anyway? Well, this is the brass tacks of it. Apocalypse Now is based off the novella written by Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness. It follows a steamboat sailor named Marlowe as he sails up the Congolese River in search of a man named Kurtz. They're employed by a Dutch ivory company who have investments in the region, and Kurtz served as their representative, so him going missing is a very big deal. As Marlowe goes through his journey, he sees the way the native Africans are treated by the colonial Europeans who are investing into the continent. The whole point of the novella was to break down the idea of civilization, to ask who was the savage and who was the civilized one. There's a lot of scenes where the Europeans abuse the Africans, beating them or exploiting them in inhumane ways. Kurtz himself is revealed to have gone completely insane as he lived with the natives, propping himself up as a god king that's worshipped by the Congolese, all the while he's devolving into a blathering madman. Marlowe discovers Kurtz as he's dying of jungle fever, which is malaria, and he hears his final request, to hide all the documents and reports that Kurtz wrote during his time in the Congo, so nobody from the company can have them. And the final words he hears from Kurtz as he dies are simply, "The horror, the horror."
This is different from Apocalypse Now, Colonel Kurtz, where Colonel Kurtz wanted to make sure that his son would know the truth of his actions in the Vietnam War, and as well as his base of operations in Cambodia. He wanted to make sure that his son would know the truth and not the fabricated lies that the military would have given him. And he asked Captain Willard, his assassin, to make sure that he relays all that he has seen, all that he knows of Colonel Kurtz. So yeah, this is different from this story here, Heart of Darkness.
Darkness is a very good story. Some say it's too drawn out or that's kind of dry, and I think a lot of that is because people are forced to read it in high school. The classic problem of older literature getting a bad rap because you had to read it during a time when you couldn't give two shits less. But the story itself is still good. It raises a lot of questions about society, human nature, and the depths someone can sink to. It's a very influential novel, inspiring works all on its own. Hell, if you ever played Far Cry 2, that game is basically a soft adaptation of Heart of Darkness.
I have not played the Far Cry game series. I don't know how many Far Cry installments are there now. Are there 4 or 5? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I haven't played any of them. Maybe one day.
It has numerous references, takes place in the same setting, and it has a lot of themes of the story that are used in the game. I mean, hell, the final mission in the game is literally called Heart of Darkness, and you have to take a boat up a river in order to get to the final confrontation. It's kind of on the nose. Though easily the most famous piece of media inspired by Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now is Spec Ops: The Line. I did a whole video talking about this, which is a little rough. It was one of the first major videos I did, and still had some growing pains in regards to structure and pacing. But
yeah, I've watched a review of Spec Ops: The Line. Who was it by again? I forgot the YouTube channel name now. Race Civic? I think it was Race Civic. Yeah. I could be wrong about that, but I'll put the card at the top right here for my reaction to Spec Ops: The Line. Yeah, I still need to delve deeper into Spec Ops because I was, curious to understand how the backstory of that game became what it is, in terms of the setting, Dubai. How is it possible that Dubai became this desert, abandoned, war-torn city when it's supposed to be one of the most expensive, influential financial capitals in the world. So yeah, I have some suggestions from my viewers who sent me some YouTube channels that I can go and check out. The videos are based on Spec Ops: The Line, and I still need to do that. But definitely I need to play this game at least once. Yeah.
a lot of what was said I still stand by, and the point of this is to talk about Apocalypse Now influences. Now, this game kind of does its own thing with the source material, being much more of a condemnation character study of the protagonist Walker, compared to the others which focus on a mysterious figure built up throughout the story instead. Still, the DNA is 100% there and outright admitted to. The structures are usually the same, focus on a protagonist on an obsessive journey to find a mysterious figure, but each one handles their own themes and intentions with the story. Heart of Darkness is about tearing down the idea of civilization, to show supposed gentlemen devolve and become worse savages than the native Africans they thumb their nose at. Spec Ops: The Line is about condemning Walker and the idea of the military sim hero complex, that you are a super soldier coming in to save the day because you're awesome. Obviously spun on its head by showing Walker fuck everything up and make things leagues worse than they were before he got there. And Apocalypse Now, well, that's got its own themes to it. So the obvious thing to mention is that the setting has changed from the novel. Instead of being in the middle of the Congo, it's in the middle of the Vietnam War. Instead of focusing on a bunch of ivory traders and established gentlemen, it's American soldiers. Kurtz is now a colonel in the Special Forces, and Marlowe is now Willard, an operator for MaxDog, which was a classified program that focused on deniable missions.
Yeah, deniable missions.
Yeah, so if you ever felt like Black Ops 1 had some Apocalypse Now vibes, you are not wrong. Still, Willard is burned out from his time in the war, but not in the way you think. He's not tired of being in the war. No, Willard is a very conflicted protagonist.
He's trapped. He's trapped between fighting in Vietnam and becoming a civilian or returning to his civilian life in America. He can't stick in one place. The moment he returns into his civilian lifestyle, if I can say that, he wishes to go back into the battlefields of Vietnam. Once he's in the battlefields of Vietnam, he wishes to return back to his civilian life. So he's conflicted. He doesn't really know where he stands, and this type of back and forth or loop is affecting him mentally. to the point where he waits in a hotel room waiting for a mission from the military. And the longer he waits, the more he breaks down mentally. You know, he starts bashing in mirrors, he starts dancing some sort of combat maneuvers, and he makes a combat roll on the bed. He has his gun, his pistol right next to him. So he's at the verge, he's at the point of probably killing himself because of the agonizing wait, waiting for a mission. And also thinking about maybe I should go back into the civilian life. So yeah, he's all over the place. And this mission probably saved his life. This mission that he was given probably saved his life, because he probably could have killed himself in that hotel room.
The guy can't decide what side of the world he truly belongs in. During his first tour, he was desperate to get back home, yet when he was home, all he wanted to do was return to Vietnam. Sinking into such a powerful depression, it ruined his marriage. Willard battles these sides of himself through the whole film. The guy is stuck between becoming another face in the crowd and wanting to stay in the jungle until the day he dies. He's already losing his mind and slipping into darkness, much like Kurtz does in the story. So instead of being an outside observer, Willard sees an almost kindred spirit between him and Kurtz. As he reads through the dossier, he finds himself sympathizing with his situation and even respecting the man. So instead of condemning Kurtz or just painting him as pure evil, Apocalypse Now instead wants you to actually consider what Kurtz is saying, his methods, and think about the government's role in the problem.
But you know, there is one thing that kind of made me question the actions of the military. Why would they send so many dossiers and information about Kurtz to his assassin, you know, Captain Willard? Why would they send Captain Willard so many dossiers about the accomplishments, about what he has done, about how he operates within the military, all of these types of information, and even private letters that he would send to his family, Colonel Kurtz. He would send letters to his wife, he'd send letters to his child, to his son. And these are the types of dossier information that's being compiled and being given to Captain Willard. Why would they give so much of it? Because now Captain Willard starts to build up that sympathy or that empathy for Colonel Kurtz. He understands Colonel Kurtz's background and why he's doing these certain types of things, why he has come to these different types of conclusions. And this, you know, builds up that admiration for Colonel Kurtz. And that's not something you want your weapon to do. You don't want your assassin to start having feelings for his target. So yeah, it was quite interesting that the military gave him so much information on Colonel Kurtz. Yeah, when they wanted Captain Willard to kill him in the end. You'll make it very difficult for the assassin to do that, I think. I don't know. But in the movie, he succeeded. Yeah. Oh, that's a spoiler. I'm sorry.
Because it's not just one man losing his mind from the horrors of war and causing further death and suffering. It's actually much more complicated than that. But before we go any further, I'm going to put up a spoiler warning for Apocalypse Now. It's weird to do this due to how famous the film is, but regardless, it's going up. I'm going to talk a lot about plot details and essentially give my own view on the movie, I guess. And it's a very good film. You should definitely sit down and watch before it goes any further.
Definitely go and watch it and then come back here, or go first and watch the review from TheAlmightyLoli. Then you can come and watch my reaction.
And yes, we are absolutely going to talk about the alternate versions.
Alternate versions?
A soldier.
So the story around Kurtz is very interesting. He was a true patriot, giving up a chance at a career so he could join the Special Forces and help fight the war in Vietnam. He was exceptionally old for the job, being damn near 40 when he started training, yet he pushed through and became a commander. Despite being so well respected, Kurtz ran into numerous roadblocks during his time in the war, from bureaucracy to hypocritical moral judgments. One such example is that Kurtz murders a bunch of South Vietnamese officials he accused of being NVA spies. He sought no approval or permission for it, he just had them killed. This is the driving force that causes the government to order Kurtz's assassination, the mission Willard receives at the beginning of the film. We're led to believe it's proof that Kurtz lost his mind, suddenly ordering the deaths of people with no proof of betrayal, but it's later revealed Kurtz was actually correct. They were spies, and ambushes in Kurtz's sector dropped off to almost nothing once they were dead. Despite being right, he's still punished for his actions, which...
Yeah, he was right. However, there is a procedure to these types of things. You don't just act because you believe and you know that you're right. It just doesn't happen that way in the military. There's a chain of command that you must adhere to, that you must report to, and they will be the ones who will give you the final order on what you should do or how you should proceed. You know, you need that military backing, you need that political backing. You don't just act on your own accordance, because that can have a blowback on the military or even the state that your military is operating under. So these types of procedures and bureaucratic footsteps that you must complete are very important. However, yes, it is a bit questionable why the military, or should I say the generals who are involved in this entire situation would, decide that they will assassinate one of their best and brightest soldiers. Yes, he might have lost his mind, but they could have apprehended him and brought him back to the United States of America to face charges, that relate to his actions in Vietnam. But I guess maybe the military didn't want this entire fiasco to blow up in their faces. They didn't want Colonel Kurtz to bring them into disrepute. They also did not want to make this an international scandal that might compromise or jeopardize the military's mission in the Vietnam War.
Is what kicks off his descent into insanity. Kurtz despises the command in charge of the war. Now, Vietnam itself was a very contentious conflict and is such a massive shit show, nobody can even really agree on what really happened. Some see it as America completely fucking the pig and losing the war and the biggest embarrassment of the 20th century. Others see it as America being robbed of a victory through subversive means to convince the population they lost when militarily, America did win. It's a messy situation, one made messier by the fact it was a literal proxy war in the grand scheme of the Cold War.
Yeah, I still don't know much about the Vietnam War or the Civil War that also occurred there. I'm not entirely sure. So with this, I'll kind of sit back on it because I don't know much about it. Yeah.
North Vietnamese were bankrolled and armed by the Soviet Union and Maoist China in an attempt to cause a communist coup. The South tried to fight them off, but inefficiency and government corruption caused things to sputter out and never get much better. If you want to know how bad things got in regards to propaganda, here's a pretty famous picture. The execution picture was used the world over to push how unethical the war was and that the West needs to back off. But this is ignoring major context. For one, the man with a gun to his head was an NVA terrorist that had just committed the murder of a South Vietnamese police officer and his family, and was found next to a mass grave being dug for civilians supposedly murdered by the Viet Cong. Eddie Adams has been quoted as saying he regrets how much the picture has been taken out of context, since it became a major anti-war image despite the context around the incident showing it was much uglier than just bad man executes crying civilian, even saying his big regret was not getting footage of the man killing the family so the world would know for sure who he really was. Apocalypse Now is...
Okay. However, why did they not apprehend him? Instead of executing this person, they could have just apprehended him and, he would face the justice system within Vietnam or the United Nations also, when you think about, well, I don't know if the International Criminal Court existed during that time. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to just double check that. But, there must be other mechanisms, other justice or jurisprudence legal systems that can be used, to find justice for the people who have lost their lives, instead of executing a prisoner of war, essentially, on the spot. But things happen, I guess.
is all about this debate. Not this debate in particular, but the ethics of war and what would it actually take to win something as nasty as Vietnam.
You know, Jerry, this guy, like when I watched the movie, I just saw this individual next to the general. He's eating his food, he's looking at people, and I'm asking myself, Jerry, are you going to say anything? Because he said nothing. He only said, what did he say again? You must eliminate or exterminate with extreme prejudice. Yes, you have to eliminate Colonel Kurtz with extreme prejudice. That's all he said. That's all he said. I think he was a politician, this guy. I'm not entirely sure. But it was just funny, just seeing this guy eating, looking at people, or should I say looking at Captain Willard, looking at the general, looking at the colonel that's also inside the room there. It was just weird.
How could you argue morality in something as grisly as this? What makes someone a murderer? Who gets to judge the murderer? Why is one murderer punished but not the other? These questions embody the spirit of the film.
Charging a man with murder in this place was like handing out speeding tickets at the Indy 500.
That's why I'm saying it's not necessarily that Colonel Kurtz murdered these 4 double agents. It's not that he murdered these double agents. It's the manner in which he had conducted that action. He did it behind the military's back. He did it behind the political authorities' back. And you don't want that to happen. You don't want your assets to do as they please, because it's going to be the responsibility of the military and the political apparatus of the state to now deal with the fallout. So I would say that Colonel Kurtz, was a liability, and he was a very dangerous liability. And they found no other way to resolve this situation other than to eliminate the threat.
The reason why Willard sympathizes with Kurtz is because he shares similar beliefs to him, that war is something you do anything to win. Willard already embodies this by being part of MACSOG, an already shady organization that performs assassinations against various targets around Vietnam. Willard himself had killed a tax collector some years before the events of the film, so the idea of going after Kurtz for murder sets off Willard's bullshit detector, because the men ordering them around are already amoral killers. They just send other people to do
Jerry.
it instead of picking up the gun themselves. You see this difference a lot in the movie. The guys like Willard and Kurtz, and the guys who aren't them. The obvious one being the rest of the boat crew Willard is traveling with. They're a bunch of young guys who have been sheltered from the worst of the war for the most part. They've seen action, but they're still just guys in the Navy.
I found them to be idiots. I found them to be They were not problematic, but they just weren't the right people for the job. They were just not the right people for the job. When you think about Clean was 17 years old. Someone who's still supposed to be in high school, or, graduating from high school and going over to some sort of tertiary education. He should not be here. He's too young. But he was sent to Vietnam. He was sent to be aboard this patrol boat. And when you think about the leadership of this boat, Chief Phillips, also, he's just not the person for the job. He was asking too many questions. He was, second guessing the orders of Captain Willard. And he was insisting on wanting to know what is this classified mission that Captain Willard is on. You're not supposed to be doing any of that. Your orders were clear. You are to transport Captain Willard to where he needs to be, and that's it. But we went for detours. We went to different places, trying to make sure that the crew members are happy. Especially when Captain Willard was also, joining in on trying to communicate and talk to the other crew members on the patrol boat, and, they had their time of activities. But it was a distraction. It was a detour. And these are the types of things that Captain Willard did not need. If it were me, I would have chosen a team that is just as mentally focused as Captain Willard to complete this mission. But instead, the military sent him people who don't want to be here, people who are absent-minded, people who are very loud and rowdy and not incompetent, and just lacking the respect of their position. But it's not just them. It's not just this patrol boat. I would say, throughout the entire movie, there were many moments where you would see many of these military men just doing things that is just unbecoming of a soldier. No respect of their uniform, no respect of the chain of command, no respect of the equipment that they are using. They use it as if they were playing with toys. And it was just so bewildering, just to see them, how they entertain themselves with military equipment. If I remember correctly, there were two other patrol boats that were racing the opposite. They were racing the opposite side of the main patrol boat that we are following with Captain Willard, and they would throw fire. I think it was some sort of like a fire stick or something. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, they threw some very dangerous flammable material onto the patrol boat. It caught fire. The patrol boat caught fire. Yes, granted, it was just the roof of the patrol boat and they could, just take that off. But that is very dangerous. That's very risky. If the fire, landed in one of the diesel barrels, that entire boat would have exploded. So there were many moments in the movie where you could see that there was just lack of discipline, lack of respect of the uniform, of the equipment, no order, and the soldiers themselves, they needed a commanding officer to control them. They could not control themselves. They could not respect themselves. They could not respect their entire military themselves. They needed someone else to command them, to be respectful. And yeah, that was just disappointing, really.
Joke around just seem to be killing time until they're allowed to go home. You have Chef, a Cajun from New Orleans who wants to be a cook. Clean, a young kid from the ghetto, played by a young Lawrence Fishburne, who actually lied about his age to get the role, which is one hell of a
Really? Wow.
debut. And Lance, a famous professional surfer who's only really interested in doing drugs. You also have Chief, the actual captain of the boat who runs his ship as tight as he can. They all feel distinctly disconnected from Willard. He mainly keeps to himself and doesn't really talk to the others too much. He does talk to them on occasion, but everyone all around is kind of wary of him. The boat crew doesn't know where they're going, and they don't really want to know. Chef just assumes.
No. Chief Phillips does want to know. He did want to know. He insisted many times, asking Captain Willard, where are we going? How far is where are we going? And what's going to happen when we're there? Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be a dangerous situation? Is this something that you want to do? Is this something that you think you can handle? Like, he asked them a lot of questions time to time. Yeah, so Chief Phillips definitely wanted to know. The other crew members, yeah, they were just along for the ride. They were enjoying themselves until Chef encountered a tiger. Then, his entire attitude changed for the mission.
They're dropping off Willard so he can blow up a bridge. They make it a point that the boat crew doesn't really know who Willard is or even trust him that much. He's the outsider coming on board to tell them what to do. It's why they have such distinct personalities contrasting Willard. The guy is very quiet, introspective, and mainly just stays in his own head.
He was quiet, and introspective. However, there were moments where he did try to open up to the crew members, especially when they left Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore. They left Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore and his unit, and Captain Willard took one of Kilgore's surfboards, and he ran away with it along with Lance, and it seems as if they were having fun. That was the first time we actually saw Captain Willard smile and laugh, and everybody else on the boat were also enjoying themselves. Seeing how Captain Willard was just spontaneous in just doing something unexpected. And even when they were hiding in some sort of forest, well, not really a forest, it was like it was on the river, but in the trees, deep in the trees. And Kilgore would have a speaker on one of his helicopters, and it would announce that he'd want his board back. He says that the surfboard was his favorite surfboard. He wants it back. And they all had a laughter, a funny moment about that situation, and it seemed like they were all connecting at that very moment. And also there's other parts, but this was one of the main ones, because this is where it started, where Captain Willard would start to open up just a bit. Yeah.
Only really pipes up when he feels comfortable, and deep down, he has a dark side he tries to keep hidden from the rest of the boat crew, though it does creep out on occasion. It's why he's so fascinated with Kurtz, because he looks over at the rest of the boat crew and just sees a bunch of guys that don't really share his worldview. They're just a bunch of kids who flake out when things get serious. But to Willard, Kurtz is almost like the perfect soldier, someone who despises the hypocrisy of command, the lies they sell and punish people over, and someone who is willing to push himself to the limit and throw everything away because he truly believes in what he's doing. While Willard was ordered to kill him, he's not the first guy they sent in whatsoever. The government sent in multiple agents to try and whack Kurtz, one such being a man named Colby, who went missing during his operation and is actually brainwashed into being a member of his army, implied to have went down the same road Willard is doing, something that plays into the ending quite a bit. Now, the final confrontation is one of the most famous aspects of Apocalypse Now, when Willard and the surviving members of the boat crew finally reach Kurtz. They cross over into Cambodia and stumble into the rogue army the colonel is building. They are woefully unprepared for when they finally get there, completely surrounded by the brainwashed followers and pagan ideology that Kurtz has built up.
And that's what I'm saying, I was quite surprised to see that, Captain Willard was going to be sent alone on this mission, when Colonel Kurtz has an entire cult defending him. He has his own private army, and, just regular civilians carrying weapons, protecting him and fighting for him till death. So I was quite surprised that, the military would send only Captain Willard to accomplish this task, when he would need maybe a small unit of soldiers or assassins like him to complete the mission.
The crew tries to scout out the temple, but they're quickly discovered and captured, with Chef being decapitated and Willard forced to sit down and talk with the man himself.
And the reason why Chef was decapitated was because he was going to alert the military about the location of Colonel Kurtz's base of operations, and he would order an airstrike on the base. But Colonel Kurtz and his people found that out before it was too late, and they captured him, they captured Chef, and then decapitation.
Marlon Brando, despite the difficulties he's caused during production, he never read the script and didn't realize Kurtz was meant to be a very muscular man, so he came in severely overweight. He was a perfect...
Well, he wasn't really overweight. Well, in my perspective, as someone who's acting as a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old military serviceman, he kind of looked all right for his age. He didn't look overweight. When we finally saw Colonel Kurtz in the light, if I can say that, in the sunlight, once he opened the doors that were holding Captain Willard in some sort of like a prison of some sort. Once they opened the doors and they let the sunlight in, and we could finally see Colonel Kurtz, his full body, his face and everything else, he looked all right. He didn't look overweight. He looked fine to me.
pick for the role. The man holds so much menace with how he looks, how he talks. Everything about him just sets you on edge. But
Definitely. The way he talked was so calm and collected and methodical, and like, if you would want to understand how he thinks, if you would want to understand when he gets angry or when he's happy or when he's sad or when he's depressed, you wouldn't be able to find those telltale signs to say that, okay, no, now he's giving me this hint that he's angry or that he's happy. You can't really tell with him because his face was also looking emotionless, and the way he talked was just so calm. So he was very dangerous because of that unpredictability of how he, presents himself. It's very one-dimensional. I think you'll only know is when he kills you. That's the only time when you'll know that he's actually angry with you. I'm going to kill you right now. Before that, you just wouldn't know because he's so soft-spoken, he's so calm. You can't really find a button to push or to press to make him act in a particular way. You can't do that with him. You can't manipulate him. You can't manipulate his emotions. He's in complete control. Yes, he's insane to a certain degree, but his insanity is very calm. Yeah.
despite that, the guy is very soft-spoken.
I was sent on a classified mission, sir.
No longer classified.
Never really raising his voice except for very specific moments, but the power behind his words is impossible to describe. And the best part? Most of his monologues are completely off the cuff. As stated, Brando never really
That's impressive. That is impressive.
read the script, so all of this is off the top of his head or very brief notes. It's really amazing stuff since his monologues are such iconic parts of the film, and to know it was all just improv Brando came up with because he was too lazy to read the script is kind of insane. Still, the monologues from Kurtz reveal exactly what his philosophy is, particularly the arms story. When Kurtz was with the Special Forces, they went to one of the local villages to vaccinate the children for polio. They left and returned to find that the Viet Cong came in and hacked off the arm of every vaccinated child, put into a pile. Kurtz, previously described as a very caring and kind man, is broken by the sight, horrified at the idea of somebody chopping off the arms of children for something as small as taking vaccinations from the enemy. But in the horror, he realized the genius of the action.
The moral terror of it all. Yes, it may seem as if it's a genius move to try and demoralize your opponents by inflicting such pain and suffering on the vulnerable, but it doesn't really work. You don't win wars by terrorizing civilians. You win wars by eliminating your enemies. And eliminating your enemy through psychological warfare is just not enough. In fact, I would say that that is a cowardice move. Inflicting such pain on the weak and the defenseless, it's a cowardice move. It's weakness. Instead of fighting your enemies, you instead, target young children because they cannot fight back, because they are weak, because you are strong, because you're an adult, and because you think you believe in what you are fighting for is right and it is just, and there is no cost to victory. You would target people who cannot fight back. That's cowardice. That's weakness that I do not find any form of genius from. If you want your point of view or your ideals or your way of life or your belief in your kind of existence to be the dominant in that region, you must fight against your enemies face to face, teeth to teeth, bullet to bullet, and let us see who wins, instead of targeting young children to justify that this is how strong we are. doesn't show me strength, doesn't show me any form of mental fortitude. It just shows me weakness.
The horror is the point, to make someone lose faith and wonder just what kind of monster was capable of doing something like this. But they weren't monsters. The men who chopped off the arms of the kids are still men. They are human beings. They were able to put aside their own beliefs, their own morality, what made them who they were, all to terrify the enemy.
But it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Terrifying your enemy that way doesn't work. I mean, when you think about the terrorist attacks in the United States of America during 9/11, did that terrify the United States of America into submission? No, it did not. In fact, it just ignited a fire that has consumed so many countries in the Middle East. Fighting with terror, using civilians for it is pointless. You are wasting energy. You are wasting any form of support that you might get or sympathy that you might get. You'll only be seen as a threat that needs to be eliminated. So showing me your conviction, your strength, your mental fortitude to do something so heinous, so evil, in hurting children, and you think that you're strong from doing something like that. No.
Point is to show you are willing to do anything to win.
Anything to win. I expect you to, be having a gun in your hand, having a grenade in your hand, fighting your enemies until they shoot you with so many bullets until you die. Then I'll say, yes, you are brave, you are strong, you fought to death to try and gain that victory. But when you kill children, when you maim children, when you cut off their arms, no.
Anything to put aside hesitation, fear, and instead weaponize moral terror to become so horrible your enemy cannot handle it anymore. As easy as it is to write off Kurtz as completely insane, he does have a sense of logic that he's working with. It's not random babbling. In fact, he's never like that. The man is operating off a philosophy, one that isn't completely unfounded. There is a strange hypocrisy in the idea of trying to win war in an ethical manner. As Kurtz himself puts it, they train young men to drop fire on people, but they can't write fuck on their airplanes because it's obscene. When you think about it and actually sit back, this really doesn't make any sense. What is the line before something becomes unethical in something like war? Murdering civilians? Torture? Rape? From Kurtz's point of view, none of this is off the table, because the very act of war itself is the breeding ground for all of these actions. If it gets the enemy to surrender, you do anything to break them.
Yeah, but like I've stated before, killing civilians doesn't work. It never has. It never has. If anything, it just emboldens your enemies to have the strength to defeat you even more. And it also emboldens the civilians to turn themselves against you, because now you are a threat to them as well. So taking any means necessary to win a war, there are limits to it. And yes, there is that line. If you cross that line, you will never be able to attain your victory. You will never win. That's why, like for instance, on the African continent, when you think about the DRC and the M23 rebels, they are also using these type of tactics where they rape, where they kill, where they destroy, and terrorize the civilians in that region of the country of the Democratic Republic of Congo. They're using these tactics, this moral terror. But it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. The state of the Democratic Republic of Congo is still fighting against them. The Southern African Development Community are still sending forces to fight against them. They are not terrified by cowards that would use civilians as a way to terrorize the government and the authority on the African continent. No. We continue to push against M23 and those who fund them, those who support them, because what they are doing is wrong. You're not fighting for your ways, for your way to exist. You're not fighting for freedom anymore. You are fighting civilians. You're fighting people who are not bearing any arms against you. You are acting in cowardice attitude and notions.
The boat crew makes it to the temple. They see corpses and severed heads splayed about as a deterrent for trespassers. They are willing to throw away their humanity just for this ideal, and obviously this is a tad controversial. The My Lai incident was bad enough when it went down. Saying that should be standard procedure might not be the best idea, but that's just how Kurt sees things. If anything, he thinks arguing against this is just being a hypocrite and a liar. You're already dooming people to die by declaring war in the first place. Any tactic that guarantees it's resolved as fast as possible is something you need to do. And the movie itself does hint that Kurtz has a point. Before getting on the river to Cambodia, Willard and the crew have to stick with an air cavalry unit led by Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore, played by Robert Duvall. He has a following very similar to Kurt's. His men are extremely loyal to him, and he runs it all himself, making decisions on where they go and who they fight with very little oversight. Willard spots him miles away from the rendezvous point because they got bored and wanted to kill more Viet Cong. They choose the drop-off point for the boat purely because Kilgore hears that it's a good spot to surf, so he sends his men to take the beach based on this whim, and they're happy to do it. Now,
I've said this about Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore, that I think this is his way of maintaining his sanity. Doing things that he enjoys doing. Surfing, listening to loud music, because, the activities that Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore and his unit are doing, are just for their own, or should I say for Kilgore's own enjoyment. And the man is so confident. The man is so, like he's always out there. He's always walking around. He's always talking to people. He's always being the man of his unit. Everybody in his unit love him. They respect him. He's all of these things that you wouldn't necessarily expect from a commanding officer. He's just too jovial, if I can say that. He's just too jovial, And I think this is his way of preventing himself from going insane, like Captain Willard or like Colonel Kurtz, where they are thinking so deeply into the reality of the world that they live in and how they've been used as tools on the battlefield, and how they could just be thrown away at any moment that might be inconvenience to the military, But with Kilgore, he's taking a different path. He's doing what he wants within reason, if I can say that. Because unlike Colonel Kurtz, he does not inform the military what he's going to be doing. He doesn't conform to the military expectations or doctrines. Kilgore does. Kilgore has a relationship with those who are in higher command than him. He still adheres to them. He still obeys their orders to some extent. And he's fighting against the enemy. Simple as that. But with Kurtz, it was different. Kurtz was taking out people who were supposedly the allies of the United States of America. Yes, there were double agents, but you still had to go through the correct and proper procedure for the government and for the military to come to that determination that yes, they are double agents, and this is how we will deal with them.
Well, obviously, it wasn't just because Kilgore wanted to surf. It was the best spot to drop the boat off so they can get upriver, but they only went there because they won Kilgore over and made him happy. It's another aspect of the hypocrisy that Kurtz is talking about. Kilgore's allowed to go wild because he still knows how to play the game and make his command happy.
Yes.
He represented the sort of shock and awe the public expects with war. It's why the air cav scenes are the only real battle scenes you get in the film. the loud, explosive war scenes everyone loves to see in these kinds of movies. Overwhelming strength in the face of the enemy. Kurtz loudly and publicly bucked against command, so any decision he makes is under much more scrutiny. Scrutiny that drove the man insane and led him down darker roads, because he represents the less fun aspects of war, the shady operations, assassinations, outright crimes against humanity. At first, he just wanted to help. He was sent in to vaccinate children, but he was faced with the fact the enemy will exploit that against him, to show unending cruelty just to prove they can be cruel. It's actually a common yet underappreciated aspect of the Vietnam War. America was put under endless scrutiny for its actions in the war. Stories of soldiers abusing Vietnamese villagers, killing civilians, covering up the actual death tolls for the war to make America look stronger, tons of things that played into the public despising the war, and treating a lot of the veterans that came back like absolute dog shit. Any of you guys that had family members who fought in Vietnam might have some personal experience on the matter. My granddad to this day despises the hippie movement due to how they treat him after he came back from the war, and you have stories like Rambo First Blood that specifically focused on the treatment of veterans after Vietnam. Characters like the Punisher were partially inspired by the state of society that a lot of veterans came back home to, with Frank being screwed over by an incompetent, apathetic, inefficient legal system that let him down. And the ironic part about all this is that the Viet Cong were equally guilty of all the crimes lobbed at America. They also tortured, they also raped, they also murdered civilians. Already talked about how the execution picture was not exactly the context they led you to believe. It was warped to win over people who had no idea how grisly war is by its very nature, since the guy being shot murdered a man and his family and was found next to a fucking mass grave of civilians. It's a strange hypocrisy that the Viet Cong are held to a lesser standard than America. Hell, for years POWs were held in Vietnam long after the war, simply because they refused to release them, or even acknowledge that they were there. They still deny there was ever torture. The Deer Hunter, a film that talks specifically about how POWs were tortured by the Vietnamese, generated some controversy in Vietnam. The fall of Saigon had people clinging onto helicopters because they knew the incoming communist regime was going to kill a shitload of innocent people.
Wow, this kind of reminds me of what has happened with, what's that country? Afghanistan? No, was it Afghanistan? Ooh, I think it was Afghanistan, right? Yes, when the Americans left Afghanistan, and you would just see Afghan people just running towards the planes and trying to hold on to the planes as they lifted off, and they fell to their deaths. Yeah, this picture is reminding me of that.
And yeah, it did. Then they went to war with China, which made it all ironic. This is something the movie outright talks about. It's the entire point of Kurtz as a character, that if you're unwilling to become as bad as them, they will beat you through sheer attrition. If you do not wield moral terror as a weapon, it will be used against you. They are enemies to be feared. Now, this isn't saying Kurtz did nothing wrong, simply that he's operating off a state of mind that only somebody like Willard would understand. Pure sociopathic logic. Viewing people and situations as a number game with no consideration for humanity. Not because Kurtz is a sociopath and has no humanity, it's the opposite. He is such a humanist that he thinks he has to think like this, to become this animal in order to save more lives. Because when you're in a situation that they're in, humanity is not a factor. They were willing to cut the arms off children because they got vaccinated by America. They are willing to do anything. You see this with the boat.
But the fact that your enemies are willing to do anything doesn't mean that you must now set yourself low at their standard of conduct. It doesn't mean that you must also lower yourself down to their level of barbarity. Doesn't mean that. There's always a choice. You don't have to resort to such disgusting behavior to prove a point, to show that you are strong, to have that sort of mental, affliction on others. No, you don't have to do that. You must always, if you believe in goodness, you must always find a way that does not inflict pain on other people. And that is the hardest path, because the path that Colonel Kurtz has chosen is easy. It's easy. It's very easy to start killing people. It's very easy to have a following of cult members alongside you doing the same nonsense and saying that this is a form of terror that is required. It's very easy to do that. It's hard finding better solutions. And that's what Kurtz had failed to do. He failed to find better solutions.
boat scene, where they do a routine stop and check on a passing fishing vessel to make sure they aren't smuggling weapons.
Ah, yes, this situation. Oh my gosh.
The scene is very tense. Chef refusing to jump off the boat and check out the Vietnamese one, since he's been riled by earlier incidents in the film and is scared of leaving the patrol boat. Chief demanding he go, and then Chef finally relents, acting very reckless and just jumping from container to container without actually looking at anything. He's pissed off and just wants them to leave. Well, when he gets to the back of the boat, it spooks the villagers for some reason. A young woman rushes towards him and clean executes everybody on the boat, spraying them all with his machine gun while Chef cowers in the back.
This is what I'm talking about when I talk about this crew. They were just not the right people for the job. They were just not the right people for the job. When you think about how, the actions of Clean shooting all of those people, I mean, what would you expect from a teenager? What would you expect from a child having a machine gun in his possession? He does not have the cognitive or the mental capacity to be patient, to watch the movement of these people, to act only if there is a situation arising, or if they're pulling out weapons against you. The man was trigger happy. Or should I say the child, the boy. He was trigger happy. He should not have been in that position or in that situation. And then when you think about Captain Phillips, his orders were very clear. There should be no deviation from it. You are to take Captain Willard to his destination. That is it. Not continue your responsibility as a patrol boat, patrolling the rivers, boarding other boats and investigating if they have weapons. That is not your job. That is not your job. That is not the orders that have been given to you. And Captain Willard insisted on this. He repeatedly told this man that my task, my mission is paramount. My mission is paramount. Searching and, or should I say, stopping boats and investigating what's on board on those boats is secondary. It is virtually non-existent. I am to get to Cambodia first. That's the most important thing. But Captain Phillips thought he knew better. He disobeyed direct orders. He disobeyed the orders of Captain Willard. He wanted to do his own thing. And that is why I'm saying the conduct of many of these military soldiers, in this entire movie, it was just so disappointing to see. No respect. No adherence to orders. When you think about Kilgore, Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore took a paper that Captain Willard offered to him that had expressed direct orders from the general that you are to assist Captain Willard in his operations. Kilgore didn't even read the piece of paper. He just threw it over to his next subordinate. His subordinate also did not read the paper. He just gave it back to Captain Willard. They did not respect the chain of command in that moment. And then when you think about it was a campsite. It was a campsite, and their commanding officer was incapacitated, or he was killed in action. There was no second in command. There was no third in command in that base camp. The men were doing as they please. It was messy. It was a filth. They were just hanging around there, playing around, doing everything that they wanted to do in their own enjoyment. And when Captain Willard was asking them where is their commanding officer, they would show him such disrespect. No respect for the chain of authority. Nothing. And there were many other situations like this as the patrol boat and Captain Willard were, going further and deeper into the river system all the way to Cambodia. It was just a mess.
Destroyed by the incident, revealing that the woman just wanted to protect her dog. There were no guns on the boat or anything like that, it was just a group of fishermen. Well, it turns out the young woman is still alive, bleeding out from her wounds. The rest of the crew want to take her to a hospital to make sure she survives, and Willard just executes her.
The book says Captain...
Shooting her point blank, much to everyone's horror. Now really think about that. The boat crew just gunned down innocent civilians, yet Willard shooting the woman was a step too far for them, shooting a woman already bleeding to death, and they were the reason she was dying in the first place. Hell, they legally weren't supposed to be there. It was Cambodia, it was no longer Vietnam. They were under no obligation to stop and check out this boat. They had no obligation to investigate these civilians.
Exactly. That's what frustrates me the most as well. Because they have been passing boats that are similar like this ever since they started this mission. They've been passing so many boats, but all of a sudden Chief Phillips decided that this boat, I'm going to search it. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to have a stop and seizure operation on it. When he knows his direct orders are to follow Captain Willard's orders in terms of taking him all the way to Cambodia and all the way to where Colonel Kurtz is having his base of operations. That's his mission. And yet he deviated from it.
Yet Willard shooting the woman was too far. He recognized the hypocrisy too, simply with the line, "I told you not to stop."
I told you not to stop. Now let's go.
Willard never pretends to be a good guy. He's not delusional and thinks he's a hero. He's fully aware of what he is and what he's doing. He even resents the boat crew for the incident, referring to it as a lie. They cut people in half with a machine gun and offer him a band-aid as if it fixed anything. Before the shooting, they're
and that is one of the reasons why I just don't like them. The way they acted, especially someone like Lance. I think he was high, but to me it just seemed like he was nonchalant and also clean, no emotion whatsoever. It's as if they didn't understand the actions that they have committed here. They didn't care. The way Clean acted, it was comical.
throwing the villagers around. Clean is calling them slurs. They're showing zero respect for these people. This happens a few times in the film, when the crew is hit with the real face of war and they shrink back in fear. The boat scene is one, the Do Long Bridge is another, where the situation has devolved into hell on earth, with Viet Cong and Americans throwing bullets at each other in complete anarchy as their command structure is all dead. Well, there's an interesting moment when Willard reaches the trenches. A group of machine gunners are trying to repel a wave of VC, and it seems like one guy just refuses to die, screaming "fuck UGI" over and over again. They resort to calling for a guy called the Roach to take care of it, a man with a grenade launcher that scarily contrasts the rest of the soldiers. While the machine gunners are high energy and panicked, Roach is very slow and methodical. He just gets up from his spot, aims his weapon, and kills the surviving VC. Willard asks him if he knew who is in command, and Roach just says, yeah, before he goes back to his spot. Roach is essentially this unit's Willard, or even Kurtz, someone so at home at war that he's almost this ethereal outsider, like he doesn't even exist, and he treats the act of killing as so routine he doesn't even muster excitement for it.
But what I did not like is disrespect for his uniform. What he's wearing on his neck, you know, how it's all torn up. No respect for his uniform. I did not like that.
He's seen the same things, to the point you could immediately recognize him as another Colby, someone that, if given the opportunity, would 100% join Kurtz and be a part of his army. Now, it's pretty easy to assume Roach is just baked out of his gourd, and his actor, Herb Rice, probably was, but I never saw it like that. It's much more unsettling to think the character was stone cold sober, that this guy is acting like Lance, a dude who's tripping balls on LSD, but is completely untouched. He's drunk off his own thoughts, too much time in the war, and too much time to think turn him into this. Same with Kurtz, same with Colby, same with Willard. Apocalypse Now debates back and forth what a perfect soldier would look like. Would it be Captain America, a guy willing to do the right thing no matter what? Someone strong and brave? Or would it be someone more terrifying? A man willing to become a damn slasher villain because that's what they feel is necessary. This is something the movie wants you to think about. Kurtz is built up as the best of the best, a man able to complete special forces training at double the age they intended it for. He was well respected, beloved by his men, he even had a loyal wife and child that wanted him to come home. So the question is Kurtz the perfect soldier? His philosophy is around tapping into the human instinct to kill, without feeling, without passion, without judgment, to treat it like butchering an animal. The film wants you to consider this as you watch, to question why certain deaths are justified and others aren't. The obvious ones are there, stuff like VC opening fire on the characters and getting blown up by helicopters or torn apart by machine guns. That's the expectation of war. But what about killing a double agent? Someone you know is guilty and should die to save more lives. Should you just go and kill them without permission? Would it be right to punish someone who did? What about mercy killing a civilian your side wounded in the first place? The entire plot is the government sending an assassin against an American citizen without due process. The exact crimes they want Kurtz dead for to begin with. This is the ugliness the public likes to shy away from. Or it gets devolved into the most two-dimensional and easy to paint as evil that the real nuance is wiped away. Because that's the scary part about Apocalypse Now. Not that it shows the horrors of war, but to make you ask if the horror is necessary. That to win a war, you have to turn a blind eye to true evil because the bigger picture requires it. It's never a good subject to broach. And there are some out there who are full-blown anti-war pacifists, which isn't a bad ideal, but that's exactly what it is, an ideal. Reality is usually much harsher. Now, the obvious thing to talk about is the ending. When Willard is captured by Kurtz, we already talked about how the reveal of the character and his monologues are a haunting aspect of the film, but you finally get a chance to hear how Kurtz sees the world from his own mouth. There are other aspects of it as well to talk about. For one, the fact Kurtz doesn't kill Willard. He kills Chef, decapitating him and presenting a severed head to Willard as
that was a bit weird how how Colonel Kurtz came before Captain Willard. His face was painted with some army colors, the green and the black, and he was looking at Captain Willard in a very weird way, and then he would go around Captain Willard's position where he was chained up to a wall, or was it a pillar? I can't remember. But yeah, he went around him, and then he came on the other side of him, of Captain Willard, and then he threw the head of Chef on his lap. And I just found that a bit weird. Like, why would you come towards Willard, look at him, and then go around him, and then throw Chef's head in his lap like that? That was just funny. I don't know. It just seems so weird.
Part of his capture, but he specifically keeps him alive, even having Will sit close by as he recites poetry and more monologues, as though he's giving a sermon to win him over, and Willard actually responds to it, sitting and listening to the words. We don't really know what's going on in his head, we just see him sitting and listening to Kurtz. His narration does come up now and again, and it's mainly Will's impression of the man now that he's met him, but instead of calling him a madman or brushing off what he's saying, he does seem to understand what's going on with Kurtz. He's a broken, tired man, someone torn apart by Vietnam and wants somebody to stop him. Willard does the one thing nobody else in the story does. He understands him. Not even his followers truly understand Kurtz.
Especially this photographer, this war photographer. I don't know what was happening with him. He was talking a lot of nonsense sometimes, I just could not with this war photographer. But there was one thing that he did say, that, Captain Willard's word carries more weight than his as a war photographer, to account to what Colonel Kurtz has been doing here in Cambodia and his actions before, being in this position in Cambodia. Captain Willard and his testimony, if he should ever give one, or information that he would want to depart to someone else, carries more weight than a war photographer. And that was something that I agreed with in terms of this war photographer when he said that to Captain Willard. But everything else about, Colonel Kurtz being a god, and he's brilliant, he's amazing, he's a genius, all that other stuff, I just brushed it aside. The man is crazy.
They just see a god king, a warrior poet that are swept up in the cult of personality. Willard sees himself in Kurtz, someone just tired, a man who can't decide what world he belongs to. A lot of people see the ending as Willard specifically fighting off Kurtz's influence, reasserting himself and his loyalties, and not becoming one of Kurtz's thralls. That's not how I see the ending at all.
I was actually afraid that Captain Willard would not kill him. I was actually worried. I thought maybe the knife that was sent to kill Colonel Kurtz was dull, was blunted, and yeah, he did not disappoint me. The mission was not a failure. He completed the mission. Yeah.
One, Willard's not the kind of character that gets a redemption arc. He's just not that kind of man.
Yeah, he's not going to get a redemption arc. There is no, reforming or enlightenment that Captain Willard gets from this entire experience. He's still the same person. He's still fighting the same battles in his mind. And yes, he might not be part of the military, but, it's still the same Captain Willard. Yeah, he just has a bit more information. He's a bit more wiser than before. But that's about it. Yeah.
The way I see the ending, Will becomes the one true disciple. He was the follower that fully understood the leader. Kurtz liked Willard. He took him in and wanted to teach him, and the lessons did stick, just in their own way. Will saw through the words and knew what Kurtz truly wanted deep down. He wanted someone to kill him, to put an end to the madness. Even if war needed a monster to win it, Kurtz never wanted to be that monster. The way Willard talks about the situation is very revealing.
They were gonna make me a major for this. And I wasn't even in their fucking army anymore.
When Willard first meets Kurtz, he simply tells him he's a soldier. Now he's flagrantly saying to himself he's not part of the army anymore. Willard isn't reasserting his loyalties to America or anything like that. No, I think it's the opposite. He's accepted that deep down, Kurtz is right. There is a flagrant hypocrisy. These people are liars. There is this moral paradox that people just are expected to ignore. But he also knows that Kurtz wants to die.
You have a right to kill me. You have a right to do that.
Kurtz even allows Willard to kill him. The narration from Willard even points this out. Everyone wanted to kill him, Kurtz most of all. In the actual murder scene itself, you never see Kurtz fight back. He never tries to attack Willard. He simply...
And yeah, at first I thought he was going to try and fight back, but he didn't. He just stood up. He made sure that he was in a place, like he was in a space where he could just fall and collapse to his death. And yeah, that's what he did. He stood up. He went just a bit back from where he was, and Captain Willard began his slash attacks on him, and he died. Yeah. But basically, we also saw a cow being sacrificed. Yeah, it was happening concurrently at the same time. Yeah.
Lets himself be hacked to death with a machete. He was waiting for one of his followers to finally understand his words. Colby, ironically, failed Kurtz's teachings by not killing him. All he ever wanted was to die like a man, standing on his own 2 feet, not choking in the jungle from disease, not cheaply assassinated, but to face death with any single shred of dignity he had left. It's why he kills Chef, who was ordered to call in an airstrike if Willard didn't come back to the boat after a certain amount of time, because that's not how Kurtz wanted to die. He wanted to make sure someone knew the truth, and to take it back home to his family, of what Kurtz did, of what the war truly was, and that he died like a man. Kurtz was a good man trapped in his own body as he turned into a monster, and Willard finally set him free. The film ends with Willard and Lance, the only survivors, simply leaving the temple. The cult trying to gather around Will as though wanting him to be their new leader.
I don't know about that, if they wanted him to be their new leader. I think I would believe that if they would talk to him. If someone from this cult would talk to him, or maybe Colby talking to him, but none of them did. They just stood up and gave way for Captain Willard to pass through.
because they recognize that he's a lot like Kurtz, but he rejects the position. They simply get in the boat and leave, with Kurtz saying the horror over and over again until the credits. Now, there is a lot of back and forth on why exactly Will decided to leave. Did he actually reject everything Kurtz said? Was this just him saying, fuck it, I want to go home? There's a lot of questions back and forth. My personal interpretation goes back to one of Kurtz's first monologues, when he talks about how you need to put out all judgment and all hesitation. When he talks about that, you have to remember Willard is under order to kill Kurtz. So even if Willard likes the guy and respects him, he has to kill him because he's been ordered to. So to embody that ideal Kurtz wanted, Will had to turn off his hesitation and his respect. You even get hints of it since the song playing during the final confrontation is The End by the Doors, which is basically tied at the hip with this movie due to how much they kind of mesh together. But the song The End is specifically all about the end of a relationship. Now, that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, and it's pretty much up to how you view the song, but there's a lot of synchronicities in regards to Apocalypse Now with how it ties into Will and Kurtz and their relationship. You can see it as Will ending his obsession with Kurtz now that he can finally kill him, or putting an end to a budding friendship, or at the very least, mentor-student relationship, and it's essentially Willard lamenting the fact that he's killing one of the few men that he can truly understand. Kurtz even specifically asks him to visit his family and tell his son everything that happened. Kurtz makes the request to the man he knows was sent there to kill him to tell his family what happened. In a much brighter timeline, they probably would have served together and been very good friends, but that's just not the reality that turned out for them. Still, that's Apocalypse Now, a story of human darkness and insanity that does not hold any punches in regards to its themes.
Wait, there's some missing points. The bunny models. That is also a very important key point that happened in the movie, in terms of, when the patrol boat finally reached a port where they could replenish their fuel and their ammo, and there was an organized carnival or entertainment for the military soldiers, and there was this Playboy bunny model event that also occurred there, and the men were going crazy over these women. I can understand that you're excited. I can understand that you are happy to see this sort of entertainment, but the lack of respect, the disrespect that was shown by these military officers as they stormed the stage, as they were chasing after these Playboy models, and even some of the military soldiers were hanging on the helicopter that was leaving the stage with the bunny models. It was just so unbecoming of people who are claimed to be respectable soldiers, fighting the good fight against their enemies. They were just becoming hooligans, doing as they please, and the military police themselves were also just powerless against so many of these soldiers. And that situation also just depicted the lack of respect, the lack of order in this entire affair in Vietnam, how things were just left awry. And it was just a day by day, almost directionless activity. Yeah. And there was something that Kurtz did highlight, that maybe the military force that was sent to Vietnam should have been a far more smaller, controlled army unit, instead of this large military operation consisting of hundreds of thousands of men and military equipment spreading across an entire nation, fighting against their opponents. It should have been a far more controlled, managed, and far more oversight unit or force that would be used on the battlefield against their opponents, instead of this large force. Because with a large force, inconsistencies start to creep up. People start to do their own things, like Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore, and some soldiers, they just lose their way, they lose their self-respect, if I can say that, or self-esteem, and the respect and the honor of becoming or being a soldier within the military. They just became these wild, unruly individuals who would just do whatever they want. Whether it was at that entertainment that was provided for them, or it was at the many camps that we saw along the way to Cambodia with the boat crew. The lack of the disrespect, the lack of control and orderly conduct, and respect for their uniform, respect for the chain of command. It was just very disappointing to see all of that. And maybe Kurtz was right that maybe they should have sent a smaller force in the Vietnam conflict.
It's a very bleak film, to the point that trying to ascribe any moral lesson to it is kind of a failed bet. The point of the story isn't good versus evil, it's understanding evil, realizing that it's something that's in everyone. Everyone has the potential to become an animal if put in the right circumstances. Sometimes it can even be necessary, or worse, someone can convince themselves it is. To think that a single deal with the devil is enough to achieve a greater good, without understanding it will lead to a snowball effect, which ends with somebody being unrecognizable, going from a kind-hearted, idealistic man to someone willing to cut off another man's head simply to prove a point. Apocalypse Now is a disturbingly cerebral movie. It truly wants you to think about what Kurtz is saying, to consider his words, and try to parse the meaning between them. It's easy to write him off as just a manipulative madman, but the terrifying part about Kurtz is that all he's doing is telling the truth. With this, we can segue into the point about the alternate versions of the film. So Apocalypse Now famously has a lot of versions to it.
Okay, maybe I was watching the alternate version, because everything that TheAlmightyLoli has said I've seen in the movie, but he didn't talk about the Playboy bunny models. He didn't talk about what happened at that event where they were performing. He didn't talk about the campsite where Captain Willard exchanged 2 barrels of diesel for time with the bunnies, or the Playboy bunnies. I don't know what they're called. The Playboy bunny models. That entire situation there was not really discussed by TheAlmightyLoli. So maybe in the alternate versions he will be talking about it. Yeah, that means I was watching the alternate version. Yeah, okay.
Just the ones that are publicly available, theatrical, Redux, Final Cut, but there's a lot of versions that were only shown in certain theaters or showings, like the 70mm cut and things like that. There are over 1 million miles of footage that Coppola had to edit through. There is a lot of versions of this movie, but I'll focus on the main 3. The theatrical cut is, well, the theatrical version, the one shown in the majority of theaters. It follows the main story and never deviates, unlike the other versions. Now, Redux is the longest version of the movie, clocking in at 3.5 hours long.
This is the one I watched. Okay, Apocalypse Now Redux. Yeah, that's the one I watched. 3 hours. I was also surprised to see how long this movie was, and I was like, wow. I don't think I've actually watched a 3-hour long movie. I think, yeah. Wait, Lord of the Rings, were they 3? No, they weren't 3 hours. Maybe like 2 hours max. Yeah.
Long, and includes 3 major scenes that aren't present in the theatrical. The first one being a scene where the boat crew spots the Playboy bunnies from an earlier scene at one of the bases, so they talk them into having sex. It's funnier compared to the rest of the film, clearly meant to be a moment of levity before ushering in the absolute horror. And the second scene is the one that takes place after Clean is killed in an ambush. The boat crew trying to bury him stumble into a group of French plantation owners living in the jungle. They invite the crew to have dinner and give them a place to rest, where they discuss the history of the family and what they're doing in the region. You see that they're staying in Vietnam as a matter of pride. The French lost conflict after conflict, but they refused to give up this farm, even talking about how communist groups back in France sabotaged their soldiers by infiltrating supply factories.
Is that what they were talking about? Man, I could not hear a lot of what they were saying, because they were very loud, they were talking amongst each other in French, And, you know, there were times where they would talk in English, but I would just be lost in translation because it was just a mess. Everybody was talking loud, and there was music, and it was a very rowdy family. This entire, you know, French family here, they were very rowdy.
Giving them dummy grenades and bad ammo. The family's very bitter about the matter, and the patriarch begs the Americans to learn from them, that they have to win the conflict. They chose to fight it, so they must win it, no matter the cost. Otherwise, their spirit will be broken and they will never recover. It's an interesting moment, if considered a little slow, because it can drag a bit, since it's...
Yeah, it was dragging a bit, especially during Captain Willard and his moment with one of the ladies of the house. Yeah, they were smoking. I don't know what were they smoking. Maybe some sort of aphrodisiac. I'm not entirely sure. But you know, they were sitting on a balcony and talking, and yeah, there were nice views there. I will admit, you know, the views there were very nice. You know, watching the forest and the river beyond, and yeah, that was all very nice. And then of course they had their own romantic moment, both of them, the lady of the house and Captain Willard. And yeah, it did draw out a lot of minutes went into this part here, definitely.
Mainly the French family ranting. But still, it's a good scene that shows the mentality of somebody that absolutely refuses to give up, that has walked the road America already has and knows what they're dealing with. Now, the last edition is an interesting one. You get more scenes with Kurtz, particularly a moment where Kurtz reads the newspaper to Willard.
Yes.
Showing the spin at play in the American media to make the war seem favorable for them. These people are willing to lie about everything and do all the things they condemn Kurtz for. Some say it's heavy-handed, that it's the film breaking character to deliver a political rant, but I don't really see it that way. I see it as more disgusting hypocrisy the film hinges on, that they want the public to see it all as clean and heroic liberation instead of the nasty hell that war truly is. They send thousands to their deaths, but are terrified of looking too impolite while doing it, and they will punish anybody that makes them look bad. It's an interesting enough scene. Now, this is all Redux. Final Cut has the plantation scene, but it doesn't have the Playboy bunnies or the scene with Kurtz. I recommend sitting down and watching all three versions at least once, since it's good to see how radically different each cut can feel at times.
Okay, if I can find the Final Cut and the theatrical version, I will look into watching them, but on my own personal time and not react to them, because I think reacting to Apocalypse Now Redux is enough. But the other two, I will watch them in my own personal capacity, in my own time. And yeah, definitely, it's something to do.
It makes you appreciate the version you like the most, and it gives you more to chew on and think about. Hell, the French scene in particular has had a lot of debate back and forth, mainly because it does discuss the issue of communist infiltration and the very idea of, hey, you're in the war, why won't you win it to make sure the lives lost are worth something?
And I heard them arguing about communism and socialism, like they were talking in French, so I couldn't really understand what are they talking about. All I could hear was communism and socialism. Yeah, I'll have to download the subtitles for those, you know, specific key points. Well, in fact, for the entire movie. Yeah, for the entire movie, just to clearly understand what are they saying, you know, yeah.
But hell, if you want to know an even crazier one, there's outright a 289-minute long version out there.
Whoa!
It's never been seen, but it exists, and it has radically different elements, like showing Colby and the journalist die, stuff like that. The journalist, by the way, is played by Dennis Hopper, out of his fucking mind on
crazy
coke, which helped him nail that manic energy that his characters kinda needed, since he's supposed to sound like a lunatic. By the way, the cameras he's using in the film are used by the author of Dispatches when he served in Vietnam. Kind of a cool piece of trivia. The point is that Apocalypse Now is sort of like Blade Runner. There's a lot of cuts for the film, and you should really sit down and watch as many as you can get your hands on, because they can reveal new aspects of the film and help you appreciate what you like about it most. And if you just want to stick to the theatrical version, it works more than enough on its own. It doesn't feel cut to pieces whatsoever, which admittedly is a problem with Blade Runner. Still, Apocalypse Now is a phenomenal film, one that makes you ask questions about human nature, war, and morality. It's something everyone who says they're a fan of movies absolutely needs to sit down and watch. It's practically required viewing. Hell, film schools show it off for students to study. It's a massive landmark for filmmaking, and you would be doing yourself a disservice if you never take the time to watch it, any version. Still, this is all I can say about Apocalypse Now. It's damn near a perfect movie. Something that absolutely isn't for everybody. It's insanely dark, but should be watched, just to say you've seen it. The impact it's had is almost...
Oh yeah, I also remember when Chief Phillips tried to kill Captain Willard. You know, once Chief Phillips was stabbed with a spear while they were having an altercation with some of the locals in Cambodia, and one of them threw a spear at Chief Phillips, and it went right through his chest, and he collapsed to the floor. He was about to die, but before he died, he was going to make sure that he would take Captain Willard with him. He was going to, hold on to Captain Willard's face and just thrust him onto the spear that went through his chest. But that was not going to happen. Captain Willard, he just closed his mouth, and Chief Phillips died. Yeah, that was just so unexpected. Really, that was so unexpected. I was shocked to see something like that. But I knew then that, Chief Phillips, you're not going to get your way. You're not going to get your way. You are going to die here. And Captain Willard is going to continue on with the mission. Yeah.
Almost impossible to describe. From games, books, comics, video games, other movies, there hasn't been a genre of media not at least acknowledge Apocalypse Now's existence. The Kill Fuck Die album from Wasp is shamelessly inspired by Apocalypse Now, with the song The Horror outright described as looking into the mind of Colonel Kurtz. I mean, the song is named after his closing lines. The end from The Doors is practically synonymous with Apocalypse Now when you think about it. It's one of those song choices in film that really does need to go down in history as just absolute pitch perfect, being just as iconic for the film as the dialogue. This movie is something that will continue to inspire and be referenced for God knows how long, because it's just fucking good. Sit down and give it a watch, you won't regret it for a second. Until next time, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys.
I loved you in Wall Street!
Okay.
Hey, loser. Do you want a shirt? Do you want a t-shirt? I have shirts now. Look in the description for a link to a t-shirt you can buy. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll kill your family. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll poison your dog. If you don't buy the t-shirt, you're going to be the only person in town that does not have a t-shirt. Everyone's going to look at you funny. There's going to be social consequences to not having one of these t-shirts. I'm now making express threats of violence against you if you do not buy my t-shirt.
My gosh.
Will call the police. Tell them how they're not, you're not buying my shirt. They're going to plant crack in your house, and they're going to arrest you and then beat you up in a jail cell. Buy my shirt.
Yes, guys, that is it with Apocalypse Now. Wait, let me just get the full name of the video. Yes, Apocalypse Now review, practical military necessity, made on the AlmightyLoli YouTube channel, and this was a request from Helsing 507. Yes, guys, definitely this is a movie that you need to watch at least once, whichever version you would choose, whether it will be the Redux version like me, or the theatrical version, or the final cut, or that infamous 200 and something minute long movie. Go watch it at least once. It's fine. But I'm going to be watching it multiple times, I think, because I still need to fully understand everything that I've seen in that movie. But yeah, when it comes to Colonel Kurtz and his ideals and what he believed in and how he acted and what he had done in the military, really all of these things that have changed him during the Vietnam War, that made him to become the person that he was, this monster that Captain Willard finally helped in putting a stop to him and his existence as this monster. Really, it was a deep and thoughtful movie that started from a very unknown place, if I can say that, because you truly did not know where Colonel Kurtz was based. You did not know how Captain Willard felt about everything that he was going to be doing on this mission, along with the boat crew. And it was a journey of self-discovery, if you could say that, for Captain Willard, as he continued to read these dossiers coming from Colonel Kurtz, and him coming to the acceptance that this is who he is, this is how I am going to continue on fighting or staying in a civilian lifestyle. He's still stuck in that loop, he's still stuck in that mental loop of choosing where does he want to really stand, and also understanding and empathizing or even sympathizing with Colonel Kurtz and what he had to go through, and the fact that he also came to the decision, Captain Willard, he came to the decision that he's no longer part of the military after this mission. He's no longer part of the hypocrisy and the double standards coming from the military and the government. And yes, this movie, it does take you to dark places, different shades of darkness. There is no good here. There's just understanding evil, as AlmightyLoli has stated, but there's also witnessing the different shades of that evil as well. And you have to try and pick out those moments where the evil could be seen as being justified. Very difficult, but yeah, it's there too. However, when it came to the moral terror that either Colonel Kurtz is inflicting, or whether it were the forces that Colonel Kurtz, as well as the rest of the United States of America, were fighting against, their moral terror, the way they dispensed their terror to the soldiers belonging to America, I still say that that sort of terror is a cowardice act. It's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of desperation. I understand trying to use any means necessary to win a war, but that's not how you win a war. That's just not how you win a war. Using civilians, using their suffering and pain to demoralize your opponents, or to make them fear you, it just doesn't work. It's never worked. Never. It only emboldens, those who must bring an end to your tyranny. It never induces any fear, just disgust and anger. And yeah, to me, it just seemed like an outdated, obsolete concept of conducting war. This so-called moral terror. It just seems to me that it's outdated, it's obsolete, and it's just something that wastes a lot of energy, a lot of lives, and it gives you this delusion to think that what you're doing is going to hurt your enemies. What you're doing is going to inflict, terrible pain upon your enemies, to show them that you are strong. You are strong. You are mentally capable of inflicting such pain and suffering on children or civilians. It just doesn't prove any of that to me. It just makes it even more clear that you need to be put down. That's what I think. And yeah, like I said, I think I'll have to just watch this movie maybe 2 or 3 more times just to fully wrap my head around it and have my own better perspective on the movie. Yeah. But this was good. This was really good from TheAlmightyLoli. It was good to hear from him again. Thank you again to Helsing 507 for the request. Remember, guys, if you want to check out my reaction to the movie, the link for the movie, my reaction to the movie, is going to be in the description below. Also, if you are not able to watch it because of YouTube blocking you, or should I say blocking your country from watching this movie, remember that I also have my Patreon. You'll be able to find the video or the movie, reaction movie, in my Patreon link below, in the description below as well, just in case. And yeah, remember, if you like my reaction, give it a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. Also, if you want to check out the original video as well as TheAlmightyLoli's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Okay, that's it. Bye-bye.